first person ever to call you the professor?
Jesse May, the European poker commentator. It was kind of interesting. It was out of nowhere. He didn't clear it. He didn't say, "Hey, can I call you the professor?" or anything like that. I went to the Isle of Man, which I contend, and you'd have to look it up. John Duthie's win. It was either, I think, late 2000 or early 2001, and it's Isle of Man, winter. It's cold. It's nasty. It's gray, but it's the Poker Million. And it's going to be broadcast live with hole card cameras. Okay, you know, the under the table kind, right. the typical that you see on like a European telecast. And we've never seen anything like that in the U.S. And there was this hit show called Late Night Poker, which had been going on for a year or so in 2099, I believe. And it was one of these shows that like got started on some English channel, and it was first started airing at like 2:30 in the morning. Got a good, you know, then they moved it up to, you know, and it moved all the way up to like 11 o'clock at night because it was just doing so well. And now they just decided, hey, let's just do a live, you know, Sky Sports final with hole card cams. And I think that tournament and that telecast was the most important telecast, at least for American poker. And I'll explain why. So I was there. A lot of, you know, Eric's side. I mean, it was 100 and some odd players. Probably 30 or 40 of the top U.S. players are there. I remember going over with Eric. That's why I mentioned his name. But there happened to be another player there, and this was the most, I think, in terms of, again, when we look back at the history, if people want to pinpoint when did it all turn, it's, I think, early 2001, and Mike Sexton decided to go to that tournament. And, you know, Mike had always been, you know, he was doing Tournament of Champions, and he'd always been a real promoter of the game. And, you know, I mean, again, when the history of the game is written, it's, in my mind, it's about Mike Sexton in a lot of ways as a real driver. And he was there. And I got knocked out pretty early. They asked me to help out with the telecast. I think they had about 3 or 4 pros lined up to do about an hour each, along with Jesse. So it was like Jesse, I think, and Barney Boatman. It was Jesse and Barney Boatman, and then one other pro. I know Helmuth did an hour, and someone else. Maybe I was the 3rd pro in the booth. And, you know, I come in, and it's like Jesse May said, and I'm joined by Howard Lederer, the professor of poker. It's like, where did that come from, you know? But Sexton was there watching. And so he heard it. And really, no one called me that for another 2 years. It didn't really stick right there. But he remembered that. Now, in the intervening 2 years, he was enormously impressed with that telecast. It was an amazing telecast. And one of the things that blew me away, you have to understand, I'm coming from a world where we've never had whole cards.
Right? It's hard for me to get, but
and there's been this, you know, the World Series has been on ESPN a few times. Always like once or twice a year, 2 in the morning, no hole cards. Just horrible programming. And I remember I was calling the last hand. And John Duthie had ace-8. Or he had an 8. I think it was ace-8. And there were a couple 8s on the flop. And he had called a raise before the flop from, I forget who, but someone who had an ace-queen. And that person bet on the flop, and Duthie just called. He like slow played it. And I announced, I said, if it comes an ace or queen, the tournament's over. Duthie had him covered. Now that may not seem like such an amazing call, but for you to be able to do commentary, knowing the whole cards, and being able to predict, well, if one of these 2 cards comes, this is what's going to happen. Not that I was making any kind of a genius, you know, sort of bit of analysis, but you have to understand, coming from a world where we've never seen the whole cards, to be able to say that, then have the ace hit, and then have the tournament end. That was like, wow, this can work. This is real TV. You can make intelligent commentary, because so much of the commentary from the early shows, if you've ever watched them, it's like, well, he could have a flush draw. He could have, you know, oh, he folded. Well, you know, might have been bluff there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's kind of hard to do commentary, right? So
sure.
that was really extraordinary. And I know that Mike Sexton, who had always been so much on the forefront of trying to promote the game and make it bigger, came away from that tournament and, having watched that telecast, blown away. Mm-hmm. And again, I credit him with coming back. He was always tight with Lyle. Mm-hmm. Then you had Steve Lipscomb, who came to Vegas, I think in between. I forget when he did his little documentary for the Discovery Channel. It was called Inside the World Series of Poker. 1 hour documentary, no hole cards, just a documentary, part of a series. So there used to be a series on the Discovery Channel called On the Inside. They might do On the Inside of San Quentin Prison, On the Inside of LA Vice, On the Inside of, well, they did an On the Inside of the World Series of Poker, 1 hour documentary. Highest rated show they ever did of that series.
Okay.
And I even remember I was probably on camera for 15 seconds. Didn't even speak. I don't think you hear my voice. Maybe you do for like a second or two where they ask me some question. I think after getting knocked out. And I remember like 6 months after that show aired, I'm walking in an airport and someone walks up to me and said, "You were in that poker show." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Really?
Like, my mother didn't even know I was in that poker show, right? So starting to get a feeling like maybe there's something here. You combine that with what Sexton had seen, his friendship with Lyle. Steve Lipscomb would come in and done this poker show, right? You see how this all kind of came together and turned into the WPT. But it doesn't happen without Sexton going to the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I know this is a long story, but
no, it's a great story.
You know, in terms of the history of the game, in terms of a part of the history of the game and how this whole thing happened, I think it's not that well known.
No, I knew none of that stuff.
That Sexton, I think Sexton really drove home to Lyle and then to Steve, this can work. I've seen it work. I was there.
Right. Speaking of commentating, you described commentating before, conveying the beauty and intrigue of the game. So how do you respond to people who think poker is nothing more than gambling?
They haven't played poker. Period. I mean, if you play the game, you get how skillful the game is. You get how amazing and frustrating and complicated and just every emotion, right? I mean, poker is a proxy. It's life in a game form. You know, it's not fair. but it over the long run it rewards good decisions. You know, just you just start describing poker and it is life in a lot of ways. And again, and anyone who would say that really hasn't played the game. Maybe they played it once, you know, at a bachelor party all drunk.
Right.
Maybe, and even then they might even get it a little bit. But anyone that's taken the game seriously for more than half an hour has understood it. It's such an amazing game. The way, in particular, what I love about the game and what's unique, and really what I think, you know, if someone were to say, what's the definition of poker? You know, poker doesn't have to be kind of what we know as poker. I think poker is any game that involves some type of holding, whether it be cards or, you know, matchsticks or whatever, or some kind of other weird thing, dice in your hand, who knows, right? Any kind of game where you have a ranked thing, and you're bidding for the pot against someone else who has a ranked thing, and there's bluffing involved. That's really what poker is. It's about bluffing. Right. And without that bluff element, most other games, gin, chess, basketball, right? How do you win a basketball game? You have more points than your opponent at the end of the game. So there's tremendous skill there in getting more points and holding your opponent to fewer points, right? But again, poker is this very interesting game. You know, gin that way, right? You need to get to gin first. Again, a lot of skill getting there. Poker is this game where you don't have to have the best hand, and you get to still win if you have the daring and the guts and the good timing and the good instincts to win that pot. That's an incredible